The FBI, just a few minutes ago, did release this sentence saying what struck former President Trump in the ear was a bullet, whether whole or fragmented into smaller pieces, fired from the deceased subject's rifle. Now, why the statement came out at this time is, well, there was a debate, and it was ignited by the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, who just testified to Congress this week that it wasn't clear whether Trump was hit by a bullet.
I think with respect to former President Trump, there's some question about whether or not it's a bullet or shrapnel that hit his ear.
Trump responded to Wray today saying, quote, perhaps FBI Director Christopher Wray will notice there is no shrapnel or glass flying through the air, only a bloodstained bullet. It's also damaging to the great people that work in the FBI. Well, out front now is the former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. So, Director McCabe, let me just read that statement from the FBI because, obviously Wray had testified that maybe it was unclear whether it was a bullet or not. And then they came out with this statement a moment ago and they said what struck former President Trump in the ear was a bullet, whether whole or fragmented into smaller pieces, fired from the deceased subject's rifle. So they're being excruciatingly clear there. What really happened here? I mean, why would it take the FBI 2 weeks to release that?
Well, Aaron, what happened here, unfortunately, was a bit, I think, of a self-inflicted wound that the director brought on himself and the organization with his testimony the other day. And I should say that I thought his testimony was great. He put out a lot of information, some details that we had not heard before. Give him a lot of credit for that. But this was a bit of an offhanded reference. It may not have even been in his prepared talking points. And it opened up all this speculation about whether or not Trump had actually been hit by a bullet or something else. The statement that we got just a few minutes ago, I think, is really artfully drafted because it essentially says the same thing he said in his testimony. It says whether he was definitely hit by a bullet, whether whole or in part. And that's what he said in his testimony slightly differently. He said, we're not sure if he was hit by a bullet or some piece of shrapnel. Well, part of a bullet you could describe as shrapnel. So they're really being very artful here, but clearly they're trying to put a wet blanket on this fire, which is kind of consuming the agency's attention at a time when they don't need that.
Right. No, absolutely not. And although I understand you're saying artful, I do think it is. I guess the implication had been from that offhanded comment that maybe it wasn't a bullet at all, right? That it was a piece of the teleprompter or something like that. And that obviously incensed Trump. So now they're being clear. It was indeed a bullet or part of a bullet. The New York Times today had published its own investigation, actually, and they had some pretty compelling analysis of the bullet's trajectory. They had that incredible picture, right, that when you slow down, you see the vapor trail of the bullet seeming to go by his head, and they had concluded it was likely a bullet that grazed his ear. I guess I'm just wondering, do you think that the FBI didn't think that it was their role to say what hit him? Or what? I mean, it's odd that we're just 2 weeks here. We haven't obviously heard from his doctors or anything like that either.
Yeah, so you can count on the fact that the FBI is doing a similar sort of investigation. They have all sorts of technology that enables them to essentially recreate the trajectory of every bullet fired in a situation like this. I'm sure they've probably done that. When you look at that stuff, as in the Times interviews or the Times investigation, it's pretty clear that that's likely how he was injured. But the Bureau is never going to conclude that positively until they've seen all of the evidence. And in this case, one of the pieces of evidence that would be helpful would be the impressions of the surgeons and the doctors who treated him in Pennsylvania. And of course, Mr. Trump has not released the records of that treatment and has not authorized those doctors to speak about how they treated him. So until that happens, there's really that one key piece of evidence that they haven't been able to review. And I would guess that is impacting their desire not to be 100% sure publicly.